Welcome to Funding and Disrupting, the most in-depth business podcast for companies looking to raise money and the investors who fund them. Every episode, we interview a funded founder, plus the investor who funded them, to get the real story of how it all came together. If you're searching for funding for a disruptive technology or business, or you're searching for the best companies to invest in, then you've come to the right place. This episode of Funding and Disrupting is brought to you by Aura Collective, a leading tech PR and marketing firm. Let's get funding and disrupting.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Keith Herman, and welcome to today's interview on Funding and Disrupting. Today, we invite Naushad Contractor, who's the founder of Fable Fintech. Fable is fintech for banks, global cross-border payments with world-class plug-and-play platforms. Fable Fintech provides world-class money transfer software for banks and other business entities with a host of modules, which enables them to launch their own remittance service with minimal capital expenditures and time to market. Fable was also recently funded by Pentathlon Ventures, as previously discussed in our interview with Jarindra Kasmokar, the founder and managing partner of Pentathlon Ventures. And now it's time to welcome our guest, Naushad. Naushad, how are you today?
Very well, and how about you?
Terrific. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to start out with what they call the 30,000-foot view of your career. And from our research, it appears you studied accounting and general management in school, and then from there went into a sales position and started climbing the business ladder. You then moved on to sales and next became a marketing manager. And from there, you became head of business development and then transitioned to general manager, president, and now CEO. So tell us, was this your plan from childhood or your school days, or did it just happen to turn out this way?
So firstly, thank you for having me. And when I was young, I actually wanted to be an architect for some reason. And then I realized very soon in life that I have to study really hard and really long hours to be an architect. So I quickly gave that up in favor of trying to find something which doesn't make me need to study more, and also I can use as an excuse to not study further. So I finished my college after school in the way it happens in India. And then I started working for the oil industry. I used to work with oil majors like Mitsubishi Oil and ExxonMobil for 6 years. And I was selling their lubricating oils and greases and products across a large market in Western India. But the internet was very enamoring to me. And fortunately for me, in 2001, the first so-called dot-com bubble burst. And all the smart people who had gone and joined the dot-com world were running away from it. And fortunately, there was enough place for people like me who were not well educated or didn't have the apparently right education to be in the internet world. And I grabbed that opportunity and I became one of the founding members of the world's first digital cross-border money transfer company called Remit2India.com. And then I also founded India's first electronic wallet in 2005. It was called Wallet365.com. But unfortunately, it was a regulatory nightmare in those days because there was no regulation for it. And the best way to regulate anything in general is the best way to regulate is to block. If you don't want to pay income tax, the best way to stop working, if you don't have income, you don't pay income tax, right? Something like that. Then I started working with M-Pesa, which is the world's largest mobile payments platform. And I worked with M-Pesa in India, and I helped M-Pesa. M-Pesa belongs to Vodafone, just in case people are not fully aware. And I was helping Vodafone, Egypt, Qatar, and Afghanistan as well to help them in whichever way I could with M-Pesa. I then became the CEO of Visa's mobile payments JV in India. And while I was doing that, I met with many banks across the Eastern European continent, Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East. And I realized that there's no company that provides cross-border transaction technology platforms as a plug-and-play solution. And I thought about it for a while, and then I jumped into starting this company, which now has 34 implementations across 9 countries in mostly major banks.
Wow, that's quite a career. It's really, really remarkable. Who would you say was the single greatest influence on you growing up, and how did that affect your path?
So the single most, when I was younger, I was very heavily into sport. And so my biggest influences were actually sports people. So they didn't really, apart from being disciplined and, trying to work hard, there was no real influence of the sports people in my life in general. But when I started working, I realized that the world needs newer technology to be able to move forward. So look at our life. Our fathers' lives, they just about saw the radio and maybe black and white TV, and a couple of generations maybe saw the colored TV. Look at our generation, they've seen the radio, the black and white TV, the phone which we used to dial with our finger. That's non-existent, and today's kids have never seen that phone. So we've been very fortunate that the pace of change has been really hectic. And, apart from my parents who gave me the right education and the right guidance about, trying to do the right thing all the time, basically the idea of doing these things were just, they were like, if you've seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, I was just probably in the right place at the right time many times in my life. That's all. There was no real major influence. But yes, the Indian banking system in general was very enamoring to me, and the internet in general. So people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and those kind of guys who created Sabir Bhatia was a big influence, the guy who created Hotmail as well. So in those times, it was today if I say I'm launching an email company, people will laugh at me. But in those days, it was like the ATM. If somebody told you I'm going to build an ATM that's going to spit out money in the 70s, people would not believe you. So it was like transformational.
So as we all know, payments can be kind of a dry kind of experience. Talk to us about, some of the things that you do other than being involved in the payment space to kind of keep things lighthearted, maybe some of your interests or your hobbies that keep life humorous for you.
Yeah, so I have a 12-year-old daughter. She goes a long way in keeping life light and harmonious and fun. I play snooker if I can. In the pandemic, everything's down. I follow a Buddhist philosophy just for, calming myself down every now and again. And maybe to people like you who are on the outside, the payments is pretty dry. For us, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, well, we all have an interest, right? When we're interested in something, it's fun. So, but that's really remarkable, especially like the background of M-Pesa. For a lot of people who are listening, it's pretty well known and has grown tremendously. So now let's talk about Fable. What specific problem did you identify? And when you said, hey, I want to solve this problem, how did you decide how to choose your team to solve the problem?
Like they say in the US, when I went to the guys who were working with me for a long time, doing a great job about it, and making sure that I'm not running after just the right college degrees and, people from the Ivy League necessarily. Just people who I know, who I can trust, who can trust me, who've got the right domain expertise, is how I chose the team. And we continue to choose it that way, even though we are now almost 200 people. But the idea in the beginning was, as I worked at Visa and went and met so many banks for Visa, I realized that there is no plug and play software, there's no the world is getting more and more globalized, right? I have friends whose French teacher is now currently stuck in Russia because of the pandemic, as an example. Now, who would have guessed these kind of things would happen even 10 years or 15 years back? So as the world is getting more and more globalized, you then need to pay people more globally as well. Whether it's sending money to your dad, whether it's paying for somebody's school fee, whether it's paying for medical health care of some person, whether it's paying a bill of your house, which is in another country, like a utility bill or something. There really a zillion ways why you would want to send money from one country to the other. And that was on the rise in 2014, 15 when I was starting out. And like many of my friends and many of my investors as well sometimes tell me, why did you not create the next TransferWise or the next World Remit? Well, I think it's a DNA thing. I'm not in that. I'm not a very consumer-driven kind of guy, even though I've worked in consumer businesses all my life. What I learned there is what the consumer wants, or the end consumer or the end user of the platform wants. And then I put in all that learning into creating these platforms for the banks and the exchange companies and the MSBs, the money services businesses, who actually have those customers. So that, that's the secret to whatever success you can call our success, is because our products resonate with our customers because they resonate with their customers. And that's the way we've approached this always.
So to put things in context, Tell us just how big of a problem this is. And also, how do you think beyond the payments themselves that this is going to affect change?
So there are two major problems here, actually. Now, first is the size of the pie. And there are two very different pies. The first one is person-to-person remittances, which is, personal, I need to send money to you. And the other is for business. The for business is divided into two other smaller, classifications. One is the big amounts of money, millions of dollars being sent across countries for trade, large consignments, large shipments, oil, whatnot. That's reasonably well taken care of, in my opinion, by the banks. It's the sub $100,000 trade payment and the person-to-person transaction. Those are the two problem children whom I'm trying to bring up. And within that whole realm, there's also this whole thing about, in certain economies, in certain countries, there's a major usuriously priced offering. So in some countries, the money transfer cost could go up to 13%. The value that money, the soft goals of the United Nations and the World Bank year was to make cross-border payments more affordable, more efficient, and to make them more sustainable and to reduce the cost of that for people who really can't afford it. So our platform goes a long way in achieving those kind of goals as well. Why do people think that the banks are expensive? They're expensive because their current processes are onerous. They're expensive. So they are marking it up with a 20, 30%, whatever margin you want to call it, and selling it to you. If we are able to reduce that input cost, I'm sure the banks will be able to reduce the output cost as well. And we've seen that happening now across the Southeast Asian continent, across Middle East, across the Philippines as an example, the UK, Eastern Europe, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think these are the 2 or 3 problems we are trying to deal with: person-to-person remittances, small value trade transactions, and making it more and more available to the people who already have got the customers and the balances. The banks. When I use a fintech platform to do a money transfer, I'm actually using the money from my bank account. So why should that bank not be able to do the same thing? Why should I have to first go to some other portal, then go and dip into the same bank account, make the transaction, and then the money goes into the bank account of my beneficiary? Why can't my bank that I hold that balance with, that I'm using for this transaction, themselves offer me this? So those are the reasons that we started this company. And by the grace of God, we have now got 7 different platforms with 7 different use cases. And I would say, if I had to sum it up, slowly but surely, banks are winning back their lunch.
So what would you say so far has been the biggest challenge for Fable?
Many times, many large banks, I can't name them, unfortunately, but many large banks would rather buy the same platform we have for 5x the value from a larger company, just because that company gives them the legal comfort or the comfort of that company not going belly up. So, and our platforms are pretty core to the bank. So assuming a bank deploys our platform and we go belly up, that's the biggest risk they have, and that's the biggest problem we face in convincing them that A, we won't go belly up, and B, we're not one of those high burn startups, burning millions of dollars a month and just trying to create valuation rather than value. So I think that was the biggest challenge in the first 2 years of convincing a large bank to deploy an amazing platform, but from a very small company.
So you've obviously been through some challenges there. Now, what would you say is the least intelligent thing that you did and you caught yourself doing it and then realized, I wish I had handled this differently? Because there are a lot of entrepreneurs that make mistakes, and that's part of the journey, right? Why don't you share with us an instance, maybe there's something that you thought, I could have handled this better?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we assumed, the biggest mistake we can make as human beings and as entrepreneurs definitely is to assume and not ask an apparently simple question or an apparently already known fact or whatever you would like to call it. And thank you for asking me only one, otherwise your show would have been a 2-hour show, maybe a 3-hour show of the kind of silly mistakes entrepreneurs make. But so the biggest, I would say the silliest mistake or the most obvious in hindsight mistake we made was, in the beginning, we were not able to understand on how to offer our platform as a service. We assume that big banks will always want everything deployed on premise. Something which is so important and so sensitive as our platforms are would be always deployed in-house. And it took us almost 3 or 4 months for us to stumble upon one of the customers telling us, saying, by the way, can we do this on the cloud? Or can we do this not on our servers? And I was like, okay, is this even possible? And then we ran back to the office from that meeting. And I think we worked for 2 days continuously just to figure out the smartest way of doing this. And we went back to them after 2 days and said, yeah, we can do this completely on the cloud. And that customer was our second customer on the first customer on the cloud. And the rest, fortunately, has just been an easier ride compared to what we would have had if we hadn't stumbled upon this, being able to deploy this offsite from the banks.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are facing similar challenges in their projects?
Do you ask this to 20-year-old entrepreneurs as well, or just because you saw some gray hair, you're asking me this?
I couldn't help. It seems like it runs all the way to people like me.
I think the most important thing, I don't think I can give too much advice to entrepreneurs, but to budding entrepreneurs or people who want to become an entrepreneur. I think given what I've seen over the last 5 years of trying to run this company in the way we've run it, is if you really have an idea that you can do, you should go after it. But you have to really stay away from trying to emulate or copy, the 10 other people around you who are apparently from the outside who are having a great time. Because no entrepreneur in the world has a great time. It's a tremendous stress on you financially. It's a tremendous stress on you family-wise. It's a tremendous stress on you from all. It's something you choose to do really carefully. You don't just do it because it looks like that guy's having fun. So if you have an idea or if you have a way of looking at the world differently, genuinely, that's yours and you believe in it, that's great. But if you think you're trying to become the next Uber or the next Fable Fintech or the next whatever, I think you're in for a really tough time because it's not your idea. You'll never be able to do it. That's the way I look at it.
Since you have a marketing background, tell us about your marketing strategy and how you plan to scale Fable.
So many people think I'm a software engineer, which I am not, fortunately. So I prefer to speak in English or other such languages that are easily understood by a larger part of the world. The only way to scale Fable is to let more and more banks and MSBs know about the fact that we exist. And one of the cornerstones of this fundraise we've done is to create that awareness now. We've been flying under the radar, for lack of better expression, for a reasonably long time. We've achieved reasonably good success. 9 of the top 10 private sector banks in India use our platforms. India is the largest remittance receiving market by a long mile compared to any other country. So that's just to set the context of, it's an Indian bank is how many people react without knowing the context. They would not trust billions of dollars flowing through platforms like ours if they didn't really believe it was good. And what gave us the confidence is that many of our customers, I would say at least 70% of our customers, have bought either 2 or 3 platforms from us now over the last years. So we've realized that we're doing a reasonably good job. And we've realized that, we just need to expand ourselves and, fledge our wings a little bit more. And having said that, there is no formula for this. I'm absolutely open to a horses for courses kind of understanding. I'm sure if we come back and talk after about a year and a half or 2, we would be discussing how differently we scaled in the US and how differently we scaled in Europe and how differently we did in Africa. So, right from being more than happy to piggyback with existing bank vendors, partners, where it's logical, to being able to create a completely differentiated product for small community and, credit union kind of banks, to being able to, create SaaS-based platforms in Eastern Europe, but on-premise platforms in Western Europe. It is going to take some doing for us to be able to keep our eye on the ball because there are 4 or 5 balls. It's not just one ball we need to keep our eye on. So it's going to take some doing, but luckily for us, we've become aware of that need reasonably soon. So we've started, doing that and making sure that we're not looking at everything like a one-size-fits-all.
Now, let's talk about acquiring capital for Fable. Tell us your fundraising process. And what I mean, in other words, how did you identify the people that you were going to reach out to for capital? What characteristics were necessary for them to be able to join you?
Yeah, so I think, in my opinion, the only type of capital you should raise if you have the choice, that is the type of capital that helps you beyond money. So if you look at Pentathlon Ventures, or if you look at our other investors like Paytm or ICICI Bank or Infibeam Avenues, etc., they're all in a related space. They can guide us. They can give us a lot of guidance. They can use their network to, make us do things faster and better than we did it before. And I think the quality of that money is the most important thing, in my opinion. Of course, if you're living on oxygen and any money is good, then of course you should raise any money. That's my advice to any entrepreneur, of course. But if you had the choice, fortunately for us, things fell into place. We were lucky. We've got an amazing set of investors, each one of them as good or different helping hand in running our business, which are reasonably global now, and things like that.
How did you meet Pentathlon, and describe your interactions with them?
So we met Pentathlon through an investment banker and through our existing shareholders, ICICI Bank. And they are specialists, or they predominantly invest in SaaS technology companies. And we are a SaaS technology company. And when we met, we understood that I think there's a great synergy between the fund and our company. And fortunately, when we spoke a couple of times, we realized that it's something that will be beneficial to both. It's a reasonable investment for them. It's for us. It's a fantastic investor on our cap table, and they're all the Pentathlon guys, or most of them at least, are either entrepreneurs right now themselves or have been entrepreneurs. So they know the struggles people like us face. A, and B, they know how to guide companies like us to the next level. So yeah, that's what I would say in a nutshell.
So what was the due diligence process like with them? What did they ask you for? And how long did it take to complete the process of getting them their due diligence materials, review it? And then once they reviewed everything, how quickly did they actually fund the capital?
Fortunately for us, one of our shareholders at that time, called Infibeam Avenues, is a listed entity on the stock exchange. So is ICICI Bank. It's India's largest listed private sector bank. And even Paytm has got a reasonably strong corporate governance unit. Because of that reason, even though we are a small company, or we were a smaller company at that time, we used to have audited accounts every quarter. Something which is unheard of in the world for companies of our size. So that helped us a lot to be completely on our toes all the time. So the due diligence process across the multiple investors that invested in our round was actually quite a dream. It was very simple. They asked for information. It was all ready because we didn't have to either find it or create it or whatever you want to do, or what people do, I don't know, but it was all ready. It was a matter of days, I think, 7 to 10 days. Everything fell into place. After due diligence finishes, processes in India sometimes can be onerous. So the process took some time, but that's nothing to do with either us or with our investors.
What would you say was the single greatest lesson you learned raising capital?
The most important lesson I learned the hard way is the right time to start raising capital is the next day that you get this round. If this round comes today, you start raising money again tomorrow. That's the biggest lesson I learned. You should never sit idle or cool thinking, I've got enough money for 2 years or whatever. Because one, fundraisers don't happen in days. It takes some time. Number two, you never know who you meet. So you have to continuously try to meet the right, if you're really looking for the right investors, it's a continuous process. You have to continue to look for them all the time. And number three, you need to keep your eye on the possibility of inorganic growth, both by us acquiring smaller companies or us merging with larger companies and things like that. So all those things, I consider all of that in the fundraise bucket. And I think that's what my biggest learning is, that you should start fundraising the next day you raise funds.
How is Pentathlon working with you to accelerate Fables' growth? Can you give us a couple examples?
Yeah, sure. So all their partners, like I said, they're either entrepreneurs currently or have been tech entrepreneurs all their lives. So in terms of streamlining our processes as a technology company, they've been a big help. Their network of people in the US, in other countries, in Africa, etc., and being able to introduce us to the right people, it's been a month, so it's very difficult there's no real runway as such. But the areas of working together are the network and their learnings, the mistakes they've already made in their startups, which we are trying not to repeat.
Now, you mentioned that your advice would be to start fundraising as soon as you close a round. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs to best prepare? Because obviously you don't just go out and start talking to people without, having materials and so forth. But what advice would you give other entrepreneurs to best get ready to be able to make that presentation?
So one of the constant cribs of a few of my investors has always been that, we raise too little capital, or we're not able to raise the millions of dollars that many other such companies, I wouldn't say such companies, but many other companies are able to. And so my advice to entrepreneurs will be, number one, firstly, have a handle on what that amount is. What's that next amount you're trying to raise? Have a handle on it. Whatever you need, plus 15, 20% buffer kind of logical calculation. Because if you don't have that, then, everything in life is objective driven, in my opinion. If you don't have that, you can't have an objective saying, I want to raise money. It has to be an objective which says, I want to raise $5 million. I want to raise $50 million, whatever that number is. So unless you have a number in mind and what you're going to do with that number with a reasonably clear idea, I don't think you'll be convincing enough to anybody on why they should give you that money. Whether it's $5 or $5 million, the principle remains same. So we should start there and then work backwards. So the objective is that, and then, why would somebody give you the money is your secret sauce, your story, your growth rate, depending on the stage of the startup, what stage the startup is at. And of course, if there's something wrong in your company, I genuinely believe it's important to bring that up front and say, it was wrong, we've identified it and fixed it, but you should know. And I think that gives a lot of comfort and confidence to everybody around, because investments in startups is like families, The moment there is no trust, everything goes south.
Yeah, that's great advice. And thank you for sharing that. Now, how may future investors or strategic partners or customers reach out if they have an interest in being a part of Fable? How can they get in contact with you?
They can write to me at Naushad, Naushad, at fablefintech.com. That's the best way. Otherwise, if they will go to our portal, there are email addresses there, and I will definitely get every single email that comes in. Somebody will scrutinize it. If it's regarding funding or from an investor, my team will definitely forward to me. But the best way is to just write to me at Naushad, Naushad, at fablefintech.com.
Naushad, thank you again for sharing your time and experience today. It's really invaluable to our audience, and we greatly appreciate it. And we wish you all the best with Fable Fintech.
Thank you so much, Keith. Very nice talking to you, and thank you for taking the time as well. And I hope even 5% of what I said is useful to somebody out there.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Funding and Disrupting. Don't forget to visit our sponsor, auraco.com, to learn more about working directly with Aura Collective's exclusive technology PR team. They'll help you craft your message, get noticed in the press, and help you get your venture to the funding finish line. Again, you can visit them at www.auraco.com. Keep funding and keep disrupting.